Anybody else? You have any questions overall? We're kind of coming to the end here. We've got some more time if you want to talk about anything else.
What are on all of your supers there? And they've got different colors there, so they different.
What are they?
Are they all honey above the bottom, fruit at the bottom?
Well, that she's asking what are in all the supers and things. That brings another question about queen excluders, because I don't use a queen excluder, and so that allows the bees to move up and down as they will during the brood rearing season. So a lot of times what will happen is during the winter they'll start somewhere down near the bottom, they'll eat up through the honey until spring, and then they will start brooding up there, and as they brood up there, it'll push them down, and then they'll start laying lower and lower. The queen will lay lower and lower, and then as the brood hatches out at the top, it'll refill with honey again, and they'll push the hive, the cluster back down toward the bottom, and then as the year cycles, it does back and forth. I think that's the more natural way that bees do it in trees, and so that's why I do it that way. So these hives, if you're looking at this, and this is, what, 8 mediums, like that's not chock full of brood and bees and honey and things. I give them plenty of space to move around in there. And so depending on the part of the year, the bottom box or 2 or more, if they're mediums, will be empty, and then they'll move back down. Because remember I said earlier, I leave my supers on year round, and part of that is so that they can move up into there and then move back down when they're ready. I give them plenty of space. Yeah.
So when you do inspect them, are you really careful about how you put all that back?
I do put it back on in order.
And the frames you keep in order? I mean, it just seems to me a little overwhelming to keep all that straight when I'm inspecting.
Well, I only look at one box at a time. One colony. What I mean is, I don't pull out and inspect every frame. So in a general inspection, if I'm just looking to make sure that the colony is doing well, and this goes back to my dirt simple beekeeping concept, I'm going to pull off the top box, maybe briefly look in it, set it down, it's got honey in it. I'm going to take the next one off, it's probably got honey in it. Next one, you know, how empty, whatever, honey. When I get down to the brood nest, I'm going to pull out the brood, one frame, probably out of the middle. I'm going to look if I see eggs or very young brood. I know that the queen is laying. Put the frame back, put it all back together. I don't need to find the queen. I don't need extra details on what's going on. I just want to make sure that the queen's laying and leave them alone. I don't need to inspect everything. I don't need to make sure that everything's in line to my specifications. The inspection goes pretty quick when you have, and I recommend people, you'll be able to hear when you're become a more experienced beekeeper. One of the things that you'll graduate from, you start out visually. You look at a hive visually and you inspect it visually and see that things are in order. But you'll start to move on from the visual range and you'll start to notice smells. You'll open a hive, or you can be out, especially during a nice honey flow, you'll be able to smell that the hive is doing right. And then you get into the hive and you'll be able to hear the bees have a certain buzz. You hear, yeah, they're doing good. Everything's fine. I expect to find a queen right hive and everything's going well. Other times you'll open a hive, I'll open a hive, maybe open a hive, you hear a buzz and you're like, either I have to do this quickly because they're not going to be happy, or I'm just going to close it if it's not a big deal. Because I can hear that they're not happy. If I'm concerned about why that's the case, maybe if they're queenless, if it's during a dearth and there's no nectar to be had and they're not happy, then I probably know why they're not happy and I don't really need to investigate further. But over time, especially if you've been attacked by a hive that's upset about something, you'll learn pretty quickly The banana Laffy Taffy smell is a big giveaway. You open a hive and you get that smell, and you're like, I'm done. Close it up. Another way that I can tell is if I open the hive and like I'm doing something and I pass my hand over the hive and bees come up and hit it. That is a warning sign. So these are things that you just learn over time, and they come with experience. And a lot of times you won't be able to even describe how you know things. And that's natural if you know brain chemistry, because there are things that you intuit that you actually kind of destroy the experience by trying to describe it. And that's an actual brain cognition thing. But yeah, just getting experience, you learn a lot of those things. Yes?
In harvesting honey, how do you go about it? Do you harvest all at once, or do you, when you harvest, put the empty box underneath the full box?
How do I harvest honey? Do I harvest it all at once, or do I do it like one box at a time? Do I do it at various times during the year? That's totally going to depend on your area. In Arkansas, for instance, I would harvest in June, and I would just do one harvest and pretty much take, not everything. I would need to leave maybe 5 frames of honey or so to last the bees through the summer dearth. And so then I would get the best honey that was produced during the year. It would be the early season black locust and clover and all of those honeys that are more of a light, less crystallizing honey. And then I would leave the rest to make sure they make it through the summer, because it's a pretty harsh summer with when it stops raining, everything stops blooming. And then goldenrod and other things would come up in the fall, and goldenrod is a darker honey and a harsher flavor, and I didn't really like that as much. And so I left that for them for the winter. And so they would have that for the winter. Go ahead.
How much wheat what do you go by? 7.5 to 8 cents
per frame?
Yeah.
How did I do that?
60-pound boxes, aren't you?
Yeah, deeps are going to be quite a pretty heavy, 70, 80 pounds. So I'm trying to remember exactly. I would typically get, what was it? How many gallons per frame? I forget exactly. I don't know if that's, I just don't remember. You haven't done it yet? You can expect, in a full deep box, you can expect 60 pounds of honey. It's about 11 pounds per gallon, and it varies a little bit based on the density. Yeah. So back in Arkansas, I had that light honey that's a little fewer pounds per gallon. You get some heavier stuff. It's based on how much sugar is in the mixture. You can get honeys from like 16% water up to low 20% water, and that changes the weight.
I don't want to feed.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to keep enough honey in there so they can survive.
So for your area, you're going to want to talk to other beekeepers and find out how much honey they typically leave on and what's a good healthy safety margin to allow them to survive the winter without feeding. Yeah, that's good to know and good practice to figure out.
The first year I didn't remove any. I left it all in.
Mm-hmm. How much did they have on the first year?
Heavy.
Heavy? How much was left over in the spring? Don't know? Okay. Well, that's one of those things as you go along, you'll learn, because all beekeeping is local. So if I told you exactly how many pounds, it wouldn't necessarily correlate.
I know what you meant.
Okay. Yeah.
In the spring, when do you, I wanted to, this year, because keep it simple, being a new second year beekeeper, I'm going to do a walk-away split for 2 production hives. When would you normally do that? I mean, obviously when they've got brood, the nectar's flowing, the bees are out foraging. Do you have a certain set of criteria that you want to be in place before you make that split?
When I do queen rearing, I don't want to start any sort of queen rearing operation until I see the first drones flying. actually going out of the hive and flying. So if I start planning on my queen rearing at that point, by the time I get to the point a couple of weeks later where my queens are starting to fly, there will be a lot more drones. So it depends on your weather, but drones flying is a good place to start. And if you're familiar with your swarm season and when that happens, splitting during an early part of the swarm season, as it's warming up in the spring and you're getting good nectar flows, that's when you want to do your splitting. You can do it at other times, but you may have to feed. It depends on your conditions, but that's the things to look for. Yeah?
Do you try to avoid commercial wax foundation?
Do I try to avoid commercial wax foundation?
Yeah, because of contamination of miticides and stuff in it.
Right. What he's talking about is if you test commercial wax foundation for chemicals, you are going to find them, definitely, for sure. So a lot of people will avoid commercial wax foundation, and that's one of the other upsides for foundationless beekeeping. Don't put too much concern into that. I buy small cell wax foundation. I also do some foundationless, and I do some plastic frames as well. So I have a mixture of all of it. I am not scared of the wax foundation, and I'll tell you why. Wax is the liver of the hive, and so it's naturally going to absorb chemicals from the environment. And in fact, when you take perfectly clean wax and make foundation of your own and put it into the hive, over time it will gain measurable amounts of those chemicals from other hives in the area. That is the point of the wax. That's what it's supposed to do. You're not going to be... this is my belief. I'm laying out my case here. I'm not saying you have to follow me or do anything differently. Foundation wax is made of generally cappings wax, which is the freshest wax that spends the least time in the hive. And so it's going to have the least amount of chemicals of any wax that's available. Plus, my bees are then going to build out that foundation with a bunch more of their own wax. So it's going to get diluted. And plus, I cycle my comb out over the years, so it never gets too old and too saturated with chemicals. And I don't put chemicals into the hive, so that helps a lot too. So, and overall, all that I can say is that I've done it this way from the beginning, and it's worked well for me, and I don't think it's causing a problem, and so I'm not scared of commercial wax. Yes?
Do you, when you were putting your honey supers back on and you're reusing your comb, if you want to need to add more comb and therefore you're adding new foundation, do you stagger comb foundation or put all foundation in one box, all comb in one box?
Yeah, the question is if I'm putting my empties back on the hive and I need to add some more foundation, do I do foundation comb or just foundation? The answer to that is I tend to like to have the foundation drawn in the brood nest because I'm using small cell foundation, and if I draw it anywhere else, it won't be small cell. They'll draw it bigger. So a lot of my super comb is former brood comb that has gotten to the point where the bees have maybe filled in or replaced some of it with drone comb. So that usually ends up in the supers. So I generally, when I'm adding new comb, I'll add it somewhere in the brood nest. If I get really fortunate and have a really huge booming hive in the spring, occasionally I'll take an entire box of foundation and put that right in the middle of the brood nest. And they will draw that fairly quickly, and I'll get whole fresh new brood comb. And then anything that I don't like or is drawn poorly or crookedly or whatever, I can, or with holes or whatever, you know, my personal preferences, I can move that out of the brood nest to the outside and up into the honey supers, and then use that as honeycomb. And then when I process the honey, I have an extractor, and spin it out. That's another advice for new beekeepers. Don't pay the money to get an extractor until you actually need a good one. All right, you can just skip that for now until you actually get to the point where crushing, straining, cutting comb out and squishing it up and draining honey out of it becomes too much of a hassle, because extractors are expensive. And that's something that if it doesn't work out for you, you're going to have this big thing, this big investment that you're tied to. So back to your point, when I process my honey in the extractor, any frames that get blown out in the extractor or that I pull out and they're just really ugly and I don't like the comb, at that point I can process them, melt the wax out of them, and re-foundation them and put them back in the hive the next year.
I guess what my main wondering was is because with the honey comb they tend to draw it out further.
Deeper, yeah.
The comb and blank foundation, if they will tend to work on the comb and pull it out further, so that when they work on the foundation to draw it out, that it doesn't end up the same, or the two get intertwined. That one gets built over into the way of where the foundation, new foundation is before it gets drawn out.
Yeah, what he's talking about is if you put foundation with honeycomb, a lot of the times they'll draw the honeycomb out deeper into the next frame and they won't touch that foundation. And that's especially a problem when you're working with plastic foundation or plastic frames. If you mix even a plastic frame with comb on it and a plastic frame with no comb on it, you're liable to get a comb that's that wide and the ones in between are not drawn at all. So that's something to watch out for. When I'm working on getting the Man Lake plastic frames drawn out, I try to do them a full box at a time. That way everything's happening at once rather than trying to intersperse them.
So if you're going to add just some foundation for honeycomb, you're better off keeping it all together?
Either all together, or I would put it in 2 or 4 frames in the middle of the box so that they're, but not every other. They might do it out correctly, but there's a chance that they won't. So it's, your mileage may vary. Yeah.
Would you mix foundationless frames with frames with foundation?
Not usually. When I do foundationless, I like to put them between 2 frames of drawn comb right in the brood nest. And you can do that. You put if you take a frame of comb out or move them to the side and put a foundationless frame in there, it's almost perfectly drawn almost every time. That's the best way to get good foundationless comb drawn. Yeah.
How do you feel about putting 9 frames with the appropriate spacing in a 10-frame box?
And she's talking about 9 frames in a 10-frame box by spreading them apart. In honey supers with drawn comb, that's a perfectly good thing to do, because that gives you really thick comb. They'll draw it out a lot thicker, and then when you cut it off or go to extract it, you'll have less wax to deal with. So that works pretty well. You don't want to do that with foundation. You want to keep foundation close together until they get that comb drawn out, and then later on you can spread it out. And once they have the comb, then they won't do as much. Because if it's wide, they might try to do something like draw a comb between the foundations. That does happen. It's just, and the whole reason for foundation over foundationless is to keep the bees in line for our purposes. Right? If you're debating on whether or not to use foundation, the reason we use foundation is to keep the comb where we want it. The bees don't really care. But since we want to get in there and move things around, we want the comb in the frames. So that's the basics of it. Yeah?
Brand new beekeeper. So last year, I had my frames way too far apart from foundation bees. They built right straight across. What's my option this spring? Do I just saw that out, sacrifice the brood, and start over?
They built, you had started with...
Across the frames. one frame, and they built the foundation right straight across.
So you had foundationless frames or
black
plastic frames, and they built perpendicular comb.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
way too far apart, so they just filled in all the available space.
They'll do that.
This year, cut that apart, sacrifice the brood, and start over.
You have a couple of options. If you don't want to mess with it, I would recommend under supering, putting a box of foundation or whatever your preferred frame is underneath. And then having that go up, and then as they build down into that, eventually they'll fill the top with honey. And then later on at some future date, you might leave it on there for quite a while, a year or two, as it moves up the hive as you're building it up. And eventually it'll be full of honey and all capped off, and then you can take it out and you can wreck all that comb out of there and squeeze the honey out of it and not worry about messing with your brood or messing up your hive. It just takes a little patience. Anything else? Yes?
That when you do feed, you do granulated sugar.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do it?
Okay, yeah. That is called, it kind of got the name mountain camp feeding. There was a guy on some forum who went by the name Mountain Camp, and his idea was to feed granulated sugar, and everybody's like, how do you feed granulated sugar? And he's like, well, you do this. And so everybody called it Mountain Camp feeding. So the basic way it is, the way it works, I know I have pictures of it somewhere. It's probably on my blog. The way you start is you put an empty box on the top, and that can be either like a medium, or it can be, I've done where I've taken my deeps and cut them down to mediums because the bottom was rotten. I would take that bottom piece and then again cut another inch off of it, get rid of the rotten part, and leave with a 2-inch shim. I'll put that on the hive. I'll put down a layer of paper towels, and then on the paper towels I'll pile some sugar in there. Now, a lot of people will do this before it's needed in the fall because that's when they're doing it, and if you do it while the bees are still active, you'll need to wet it down, or otherwise they'll carry it out as trash. So the way I do it is I wait until after the bees have clustered, and
This is on the inner cover?
under the inner cover.
Under
the inner cover, yeah.
Oh, okay. On the frames, okay.
And so I wait until after the bees have clustered in the wintertime. So when I get in the hive, it's cold, and I can look down in the frames, and I can see how much honey they have, and I can see approximately where the cluster is. And if they've got a good deal of honey above the cluster, then I know that they're probably good, and I don't need to feed them at all. But if I see that they're already moved up, and there's not a whole lot of capped honey above them, then I figure they might run out of honey. Or if I know they're going to run out of honey, then I'll then lay a layer of paper towel on there, pile up some sugar, and since they're already clustered, they're not going to be doing much housework. They won't haul all that sugar out as trash. And in the next couple of days, the moisture that's coming off the hive will go into the sugar, and it will solidify and become hard, like, get wet. Like when sugar gets wet, it turns into a chunk, like a sugar cube. And then when they run out of honey, they'll chew through the paper towel and they'll start eating on that honey, or sugar. And then they'll only eat as much as they need, and then when spring comes around, they'll prefer nectar and go and collecting their own nectar and making honey, and they'll just leave that chunk of sugar there, and then the next year you can come and get rid of it, or I throw it in a bucket and save it for next year. There's nothing, it doesn't cause any robbing, nobody's trying to get it from anybody else. They only eat as much as they need. It's really simple and easy, there's no mixing involved. Yeah, and if you run out, if you take a peek in there later and they've run out or about to run out, all you do is lay another layer of paper towel down there, pile some more sugar on, and you're good to go again. And they'll chew out that paper towel and dump that out the front of the hive, and they'll eat the sugar. Yeah.
Something against newspaper for that purpose. I know noticed several times you've used paper towels rather than newspaper.
I don't have anything against newspaper, but I don't get the newspaper, so that's not something that I just have to me. I'm young, so I use the internet, I guess. It's terrible, I know.
On the paper towel.
But you can use paper, newspaper, yes, that works, yeah.
On the paper towel, you cover the whole top, and do you cut a hole in the middle, like just for them to come up through on the top of the sugar?
I don't cut a hole. I just let them chew through. Is that what you're asking? Okay. If there's a hole, then the sugar will fall through. I don't necessarily make like a dish. Like you don't need to fill the whole box full of sugar. If you want to just lay one, I like the paper towels because 3 of those short sheets are about the same length as the box, and so I can be pretty efficient with it. And then just lay a little pile along there. I don't necessarily have to lay it out to the edges. Yeah.
So the hive that I lost this year.
Got a picture of it?
I'm looking for a picture. I know I have, but I don't know where.
I should think you lose a lot of this revelation.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the hive that I lost this year had the comb is all black. Unusually, and it has all the crystals from the white feces in it. I stuck it all in the freezer. What do I do with that now to get started? To replace that hive?
You can reuse that again.
Just the crystals that are there, they'll clean it out.
Yeah, they'll clean it out. No matter what's happened to it, even if it's got wax moth trails, web trails through it, the bees will clean it out and fix it up. If it's...
Put it back out there for now.
Yeah. Even if it's bad, if it's got mold growing on it, you put that back in a good hive that gets going this next year, and they will even chew it down to the center rib and rebuild it out new. Whatever they need to do, they'll take care of it.
So should I have not put it in the freezer, or should I have just left it out there?
If you leave it out, there's a chance that you'll get wax moths get into it and mess it up a little bit, which again the bees don't care a whole lot about, but you might. I don't know what your winter conditions around here. If you get good regular freezes, you don't have to worry about wax moths at all. But in more humid or warmer climates, if it doesn't freeze regularly, wax moths can get in and eat it up pretty quick. Another question? Yes.
On your putting the sugar on the towel on top, using the same scenario, you take a 4-pound bag of sugar and cut a hole kind of about the size of the open end of the inner cover, pour about a cup of water on it and let it set for a little while. Crystallize, then you just hit that bag over the hole, and the moisture in the hive will keep crystallizing the sugar and stay even.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another way to do it, yeah. It's great.
Yeah, I noticed on there you mentioned about pollen patties. You say a word about feeding pollen patties.
A word about feeding pollen patties. I myself don't like feeding pollen patties. Unless you're using actual pollen, the pollen substitute is a very poor substitute for bee nutrition. Hey, look, it's me, my first day of beekeeping. I was 19 years old there, and that's my dad's garden.
Looks like a hippie to me.
Yeah,
looks like we're growing more than just bees back there.
Yeah, I quit cutting my hair for a year and a half, and I had another 6 months of growth on there before I cut it again.
Wow.
So yeah, now when I try to grow it out long, you can kind of see how thin it's getting right here. So that's why I keep it short. I'm sorry, what was the question? Pollen patties, that's right. So typically people use pollen patties. Oh, is that a good one? No, that's not it. Typically people use pollen patties to try and get bees to brood up faster in the spring. And while that's useful for a commercial beekeeper that's producing package bees or queens. It's not really useful for a hobbyist, especially if you don't live in a warmer southern area. And so, there's a goat. I say that the best stimulus for bees in the spring, instead of pollen substitute, is to have bees that are well adapted to your area, and they brood up right at the right time, and they'll store all of their own pollen, and you don't need to feed them. If you do need to feed, I've just never, for me, pollen feeding just really isn't an issue. I don't feel that it's necessary. It doesn't keep anything from starving. All it's meant for is to cause early brooding. And if you don't stay on that sort of thing, your bees can starve to death if they brood too early and they don't get fed right.
You can also harbor hive beetle.
Yes. Wax, yeah. She's saying that hive beetle larvae love to get into pollen patties, and I've heard that before also.
That's why you don't put one patty on at one time. Cut them like in quarters and only put a quarter on.
Put a quarter on at a time?
As soon as the bees know it's there.
They eat it quickly, and then
they get on it, they eat it, and there's nothing left for the
beetles can't get to it, yeah. But the biggest problem I have with pollen substitute, especially rather than just pollen, is that it doesn't have the right proteins in it for bees. And so if you feed that for too long, bees sacrifice of their own nutrition, of their own body, to feed their young. And normally that's replaced by pollen when it's brought in. And then that bee that's sacrificed that part of its body now goes out and becomes a forager. And if that bee doesn't get the right nutrition when it's a larva, it doesn't have as much to give to the next larva. And so when it gets to the forager age, it's either reduced in effectiveness or much shortened life. Yeah.
Michael Bush suggested top pollen traps and saving the pollen and giving it back to the bees in the fall. Do you see any reason to do that?
No, I don't see any reason to feed pollen back to bees.
Because they can save it themselves.
Yes. Pollen trapping is a fun thing to do if you're using a trap to catch pollen as the bees are coming back from foraging. But you want to make sure that they get enough in the hive, and I don't really see the need to feed it back to them if they're, like I said, the best bees that are acclimated to your area will totally manage pollen on their own. I'll just find somebody else's picture. Yeah, here's a good example. So it's just a piece of newspaper, pile up some sugar on top, put a box around it. Or you can wet the sugar and make big chunks out of it, or use make fondant is another thing that people do. There's one pile of sugar. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a whole lot necessarily, unless the hive just has no honey whatsoever.
But that doesn't attract ants.
Not during the winter time. If it's still on there in the spring, after it's warmed up and the ants start swarming, it will. Ants.
Well, this past winter, we had ants. I had ants out there in January, so it's like you say, not during the winter, because we had days that got so warm that all the insects were out. So.
Yeah, I've heard you had a pretty warm winter here. That's something to pay attention to. And then they'll eat up through it. You'll see, oh, that's not when they ate it. That somebody had holes in it and it fell through. Here we go. Here's a good picture. So this is what it looks like after it's turned solid, and now the bees are eating up into it after they've run out of honey. That's what it looks like. I have some pictures on my phone, but that's not useful for projecting. Yes?
Somebody who's looking into this a few years, is it fair to me to think that throwing up bees in the long run so that I don't have to feed them so that they can feed themselves? Because I haven't been feeding since my first year, and I had miserable
arrogance on my part to think that I can have bees that can feed themselves over the long term? Like, is this just a pipe dream of mine, or is this, because I don't even buy sugar for myself, much less for bees.
The question is, can you breed bees over time that don't need fed? The answer is absolutely yes. In fact, you should. For me, feeding is only ever done when I really need to not lose the bees to starvation. When I get my climax population, what I'm really working with and looking to do, they really ought to feed themselves. And so in that case, when I have a few hives throughout the various yards that are low on honey when it comes to the end of the year, that's their problem. But those are ones that I can afford to lose and am willing to lose and even want to lose. So the next year I don't have to deal with those again because they obviously haven't done their job. Now that also involves some discipline on my part when I'm harvesting honey. I don't want to take too much honey so that I'm actually causing them a deficit. In that case, that's a problem that I need to fix. But ultimately, yes, these aren't rabbits. They're not in a cage. They don't need to be brought food. They need to get their own food. And as long as I'm not abusing them, they should be able to do that.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I'm trying to only harvest in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a sane approach? Or are there pitfalls that I just don't know because I'm so new to this?
The question is, he's trying to only harvest in the spring. The answer is that totally depends on what flows you have available. I'm not familiar with your flows in this area. When I was in Arkansas, like I said, I harvested my honey in June because there was no flow from the middle of June to September or something. And the good honey was at the first part of the year, and I left all the honey at the last part of the year. Other beekeepers I knew did 2 harvests. They would do one in June and one in, say, October. And they would have to then feed because their bees were low on stores. But I mean, it depends on your area, and it depends on your flows and your management style. If you're wanting not to feed it all, then yeah, leave all the fall or late summer honey, leave that on there. That's fine. Any other questions? Any other totally random topics, things you're curious about, things you don't understand?
If you're harvesting in June and there's a berry from June to September, how much do you leave for them to eat during that period?
The bees that I had there, they were good, well adapted for the area because I had caught a number of feral swarms, and they would reduce the brood nest down to the size of maybe less than a soccer ball. Whereas during the spring, they would explode up and try to get into 3 deeps. So I would leave about 5 full frames of honey, or the equivalent of what was available, 5 full frames, and they would be able to make it through the summer, no problem on that.
And they replenish it in the fall as long as you have.
Right. And then in the fall, they would get into the goldenrod, and they'd fill up on that and have plenty for winter.
And that's with 2 deep brood boxes.
Say again?
That's with 2 deep brood boxes.
I would typically keep a minimum of 3, but yeah, I always allow them plenty of space. Yes?
If you want bees that are efficient and can feed themselves without sugar feeding, do you think it would be reasonable to, say, start with a breed of bees such as the Spartan line that was bred by BP Queens, Maryland? It was bred specifically to be frugal. A lot of beekeepers have used that and crossed it into their lines. I was wondering if, like, just to start, to have a line to start from, would that be, do you think that would be reasonable?
Yeah, if you wanna work with a breed that's been specifically bred to do a certain thing like that, to be frugal or whatever the trait that you're looking for is, yeah, go ahead. That's not unreasonable at all. Yes, you.
Random questions. My bees were out of January. A lot of people here probably had the same thing because we had this really weird, whacked out warm stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that they could get into was animal feed. I understand they're after the protein.
Yeah.
How bad is that for them? I mean, I try to keep the
Really?
And so I was trying hard to keep them out of it, but there's very, very difficult to do, where they get out and they get chilled and then they die. I'm just curious, is the food itself bad for them because it's so unnatural? Or they seem to still be alive, so it didn't kill them, but I was curious if anybody else had any.
The question is, she's asking about protein sources and feeds that bees get into during the spring when they're looking for pollen and there's not pollen available, like if you have an abnormally warm winter or spring. I haven't seen, I'm sorry, I'm about to cough. All right. Thank you for understanding with my stuff here. When I was in Arkansas, they would do the same thing. They'd go after the chicken grain, or they'd even go after sawdust that was sitting around. I've never seen any problems with that actually causing problems when it gets back to the hive. Obviously, that's not optimal nutrition, but as with pollen substitute, it probably works for the short term. And being the simple instinctual creatures that they are, they're collecting what they can get, and hopefully it works out. Unless there's a pesticide or something in it that affects insects, then that could be a problem.
The top cover and inside cover off and look at my top supers were full. I mean, they weren't hungry. I had people on the Facebook page saying, feed them, and I'm like, but they've got food, you know.
Yeah, but you have to rotate that to the brood.
Right.
That's, when that cold, the next nighttime, like it's cold, they can't move to the next frame.
Right.
Their muscles are locked. You got
my brood nest was still way down low. I mean, the massive bees hadn't made it into the top.
That's fairly common for during late winter if they're out looking for pollen, and a lot of times they'll even have plenty of pollen on hand. It's just something that they do instinctually, and I don't know what we can do about it or if we should try and do anything about it.
I did everything I could do to keep them out of the bees.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
They were getting in. They still managed to get into trouble. Now they're after something probably maple, so they haven't. They much prefer that.
Yeah, they will always prefer the good stuff over the other stuff, unless we're doing something that's like a supernormal stimulus, like sugar syrup. Yeah. Go ahead.
I've heard that question discussed before, and the answer was there's equal number of bees in the hive throwing that stuff out. So if you have some.
Well, it's funny you say that, because all over the landing board, there's all little granules of corn and stuff that they carry.
I didn't catch all that. Throwing out what?
Throwing out the feed that they're gathering for coffee grinds and sawdust.
So they bring it in and then they throw it out again.
It's all over the landing board.
Interesting.
It does look like the fast food I'm running in.
Well, yeah, maybe they bring it in and they realize it doesn't work, and so they throw it back out again. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you address the availability of clean water versus dirty water for bees? I've read that they will sometimes prefer a chlorinated pool or fertilized where the land has been fertilized and they'll want water there because they're looking for particular minerals or salts or something. And how close do you have to have your water to your bees?
Yeah, the question is talk about water sources, different things that they go after. Bees seem to prefer water that they can smell, in my experience. So whether that's a mud puddle or something in a cow feedlot or something, they seem to prefer water that they can smell, which is often dirty water. I'm not entirely sure what minerals they're after or how they incorporate that into feeding their larvae. Water is used largely to cool the hive. And I don't.
For evaporation.
Yeah, for evaporation. So I don't know, but yeah, bees tend to go after some of the funky stuff.
And it's only in the summertime, isn't it?
It depends. They'll get water I saw them at Dave's house yesterday getting water out of his little fountain.
But they go in swimming pools too.
Yeah. They also can use water to help dilute honey. So you'll see them collecting condensation from inside the hive sometimes. So that's a possibility also. Yeah.
Do you have an opinion about any type of queen, like maybe a Russian queen, some advantages?
Yeah, do I have any opinion about any types of queens or races of bees? I say whatever works for you. Whatever you like, whatever you want to keep. If it survives and works in your area, that's good. Local bees are really good. Local feral bees are really good. There are some bees that are, there's kind of an argument about various races of bees, whether they're actually races of bees or whether they're just labeled as a race of bees because they have a conventional set of characteristics, like the difference between Carniolan and Italian. At this point, bees are so well intermixed that the real genetic differences, I would hesitate to see a whole lot of real genetic differences there. But I have friends that swear by Russians. So, you know.
Supposedly because they're better at getting rid of varroa mites.
Yeah, the Russian bees were able to get rid of varroa mites in Russia 100 years before they showed up here.
But they're a little more aggressive.
But they are a little more aggressive, which is not something that I like personally. So whatever works in your area, and I like dark looking queens. It's just a preference of mine. It's why they're on my podcast title page.
Are they Italian?
My bees, when I started back in 2003, I got 10 Italian queens and 10 Carniolan queens. From then on, it's just been a total mix of whatever I split or whatever I catch, all the swarms. I've bought a couple of bees along the way. I don't buy bees anymore. Not specifically, no. And I don't think it matters that much. If you have bees that survive and produce a lot of honey, great. Whatever you want to call those is awesome. Any other questions? Yeah.
Talk about the water. The funky water, would that be a lower pH water possibly?
That's possible. Or a higher pH, or a different mixture of minerals. I don't know. Or they might like the taste.
I noticed mine were getting on in the mornings when there was a lot to do.
Mm-hmm.
I would have hay in my little RTV. I'd carry hay out with some livestock, and they would be sitting on the hay, drinking the water and collecting the hay.
Collecting water off of hay,
They
yeah.
were that for some reason. I wondered why. You know, they got tons of water.
Because they probably won't drown in it.
No,
Yeah, they won't drown in
They
it.
don't drown in it, but we've got ponds and creeks and springs. You know, you name it. We've got lots of water, but they prefer that hay than moisture for some reason.
Yeah, I'm very pragmatic and practical, so whatever they want to do, it's good for me. Any other questions? Yeah.
In your queen rearing section, you mentioned grafting. Could you explain to us how you personally graft?
All right, grafting, questions about grafting, what that is. Hang on a second. What grafting is you're taking a day-old larva. You know, the queen lays an egg in the cell, and about 3 days later, that will hatch, and it doesn't really hatch, it kind of dissolves into a larva. And you can take that larva, which at that point is very small, and you can scoop it out of there and put it into a pre-made or custom-made queen cup, a queen cell bottom. Right? So that's basically all there is to it. So there's a number of tools you can get. There's stainless steel, plastic, and bamboo. That's called a Chinese grafting tool. I like those because the way it works is it's got this flexible lip, and you stick that down in the cell. How can I describe this? Say this is a cell, and you're looking at it from the side, and you put that down in the bottom, and it's flexible, and it bends under the larva in the bottom. So it's J-shaped right now. You pull that out and the larva kind of sticks to it because it's in a pool of royal jelly. And then you put that down in the queen cup, and it's got a little plunger. You push with your thumb or your finger or whatever, and it pushes that little larva off the end, and you deposit it on the bottom of the queen cup. That's all there is to it.
Do you use plastic cups, or have you ever?
I personally, there was a picture here somewhere. I personally use wax cups, and I actually found, I forget who makes it now, but for years there was only a British company that made a silicone mold that you could make your own queen cups with. And for years I looked at that and I wanted it, and eventually somebody in the US started making one too. So I bought, it's this round chunk of silicone and it's got the imprint in there, and I can make 6 queen cups at a time with my own wax. And then when I process that all down, like I'm processing the rest of my wax, I don't have leftover chunks of plastic. I process the wax and it becomes wax, and I can make more with wax. So I like the wax ones. But the plastic ones work just fine. You can buy them, they cost like 8 cents a piece or something. But I like the wax ones.
And then you put that in?
Yes, and then you put that, no, you put that in a cell builder. So in my case, that was a queen right cell builder with brood and pollen on both sides above a queen excluder, so the queen can't get up there. And then once they build out the cell, then you put that in with brood and stores into a queen castle and make that into a new hive. Yeah?
Would there be any difference in quality with queens between wax and plastic cell cups based on the chemical, what the plastic is made out of, and the chemicals move in and out of it or leach out of it?
The question is there any difference in quality between queens that are raised in plastic cell cups and queens that are raised in wax cell cups? Scientifically speaking, I can't speak to that. I do know that probably the vast majority of queens that are raised artificially in this country are made in plastic cell cups. You can take whatever you want and make a conclusion with that. I can't speak specifically whether or not to whether the plastic passes chemicals into the queen herself. But again, I like the wax ones, so I don't have to worry about that. And they're easy to make, and you can buy them from Rossmann for what, like $8 a pound. It's like 1,000 of them. They're really cheap, and they're really good. Any other questions?
The recycling of the old wax.
Mm-hmm.
I always heard it's like you should do it every 2 to 3 years. You were saying it's a little longer, right?
It just happens to be a little longer, yeah. I put in 1 or 2 frames of foundation into each box every year, or the equivalent thereof at some point. And so my oldest frames tend to be less than 10 years old. And a lot of those get reworked at some point, so they end up in the honey supers and they end up getting processed out anyway. So, and because I'm not putting any chemicals into my hives, I'm expecting that there's not going to be as big a chemical buildup as there would be if I were treating. Any old thing at all. Doesn't even have to be beekeeping. I'll answer random questions. Yeah.
Okay, now this is really off topic for treatment-free beekeeping.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the new laws that are going to require veterinary approval or prescriptions for, it's for small animals, feed-fed small animal drugs, but they're considering bees being small agricultural animals, and they're talking about the possibility of needing a veterinary prescription for some of the meds that they currently feed in bee water, which that becomes bee food.
Yeah, the question is, what do I think about new rules possibly requiring veterinary approval to give things to bees? Anything that encourages more people to be treatment-free, I'm for. I mean, I don't want to, the thing that I specifically want to avoid is forcing people to treat, which is some of the laws in some states can be construed to require that, and some beekeeping inspectors have been known to be a bit persnickety about those things. So that's what I'm looking to avoid, but yeah. Yeah.
On that same topic, there was a Virginia Tech workshop today for veterinarians on how to prescribe stuff for bees because they haven't worked with them.
Really?
I have 2 friends that went to the conference. I can't wait to hear what they found.
Yeah, she was saying that there's a,
One of them's a beekeeper and the other's a veterinarian.
she was saying there's a conference today to teach veterinarians how to deal with beekeepers and stuff like that. I'm interested to hear about it. I've only briefly heard about that before. I'm interested to see how that turns out.
That's in fact now passed.
It is?
So
it has passed.
It's for antibiotics.
For antibiotics. Well, that would be the, yeah, on my list, that's the first thing that I would get rid of. Because as I said before, when you treat a hive with antibiotics, you kill off everything. And then you allow certain things to come back which are more virulent, which usually ends up being American foul brood.
They have to certify.
They have to certify?
They come out and do it. You have to pay for them to do that.
Right.
They certify it, and if it isn't certified, the state comes in and destroys your hives.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because they're not going to sell that anymore.
Now, Pennsylvania's different. The law about needing a vet to prescribe and do the antibiotics is federal, but what the state does is on the state level. Like Pennsylvania, they do inspections. They're very overwhelmed, so they don't do a lot of inspections. But when they do them, the only thing they're looking for is evidence of American foul brood, and then they will suggest a treatment, but they can't force you to do anything.
Okay, well, that's good. I would, in that case, I would prefer burning over treatment. But again, you're dealing with the cost of things.
But if you don't do it, they will. The state arborists or the state apiarists will come in and
We'll burn it for you.
Oh yeah. They'll take samples and stuff goes to their lab in Maryland.
Interesting.
You're only going to get inspected if you're registered, right?
Are you going to get in?
They know.
You're only going to get inspected if you're registered?
Well, Virginia has actual cultural reimbursement for up to $200 per hive for the bark parts.
Well, that's good.
But if you take that money, you're registered, and then you're subject to the inspections as well.
I see.
So it's almost like, do you want the money or not? You know?
Yeah.
You want someone coming and rummaging through your stuff.
That's interesting. I personally don't want anybody rummaging through my stuff.
Virginia.
And I'm.
Anywhere in Virginia.
Yeah.
If they come on your property anytime and inspect your hives, with or without you.
And the dry spice.
And what are they looking for? That's my question.
They look for any.
Are they going to try to treat it?
They don't have to look for a specific disease. They have the right to come on at any time and look for anything. They just don't do it because they can't have their square miles. The law is on the book. They can do it. They got that wrong.
Like so many things, laws are passed by and designed for commercial interest, including beekeepers. So if you want to change something like that, I suggest going to your local or state representative and seeing if you can support or offer a bill to change that. Like if you were on the Facebook page, they've recently just done that in Texas and reduced the requirements for small beekeepers to be separate from commercial beekeepers.
Our state apiarists went, all of this was already done, and they still lost.
Really?
The Fed passed everything and didn't take that much in consideration. Keith Tinder is the main state man now. He's covering up in the Washington area. But he teaches out of this school.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is where a lot of the state meetings are held, right here.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well,
every year.
They're trying to prevent something like the spread of chicken virus, in other words, spread of fowl. Well, I think if some unscrupulous beekeeper was giving nukes with foul brood and spreading it out, that's probably what they're trying to target.
Yeah. Foul brood is the most important one, and that's what most bee laws are structured for. Fortunately, not too many people try to apply it with Varroa, because a lot of times it's the way it's worded is it just worded about some disease. It doesn't say which disease. But you can tell by the way that it's put together that it's usually about foul brood.
And want it to get out of hand.
Yeah. And the fact is that when these laws were passed back in the 60s and 70s and in that era, foul brood was a much worse problem than it is today. Because we've burned so many hives, we've eliminated those susceptible genetics, and we've kind of pushed the species into a new mode of operations, and so foul brood isn't nearly as common as it was even 20 years ago.